Hello everyone, welcome to another midweek video. This one's going to be about Lightroom editing. So I've got a video coming out on Sunday which is at my local reservoir, and I'm out and about taking pictures of wildlife and mainly birds. So when that video's gone live I'll link it up here. But basically this is an image from that trip and I'm going to be editing it now in Lightroom and a little bit of Photoshop and showing you my process as I go along. So this is I'll show you the final image first here, and I'll show you how I got to that. So here we are with the original image in Lightroom, and as you can see, for a start it's a different crop. So the first thing I'm going to do is just crop that to a more desirable format. And I've gone for the same kind of ratio, which is 2:3, but I've gone portrait rather than landscape, and that's just because it's got these nice kind of verticals with and horizontals with the branches and the kind of crisscross in that bottom left hand corner. So with the rule of thirds, you can see here I've got the grid lines marking the rule of thirds, and they kind of intersect nicely on those lines, which gives that a nice composition, I think. And then you've got the bird right in the middle kind of section there. So, and I'm just going to move it across because even though that's kind of going a little bit away from those lines exactly, but I really like these kind of purple areas at the bottom, and the bottom left and bottom right. And if you're really eagle-eyed and very observant, you'll notice that when I showed you the final image, there's also a little bit of purple in the top right corner, and I add that in Photoshop in a little while, so I'll show you that. But basically I just want to move my image across a little bit just so I'm getting those purple bits in the bottom left and bottom right. And I'll click close, and then we can start. So the first thing I always do when I'm in Lightroom is just start with auto, so just the button here. It just usually gives a really good base. Sometimes if the image has really got quite a lot of dynamic range in it, you know, if you're taking a picture of a really bright sky and then your foreground's all really dark, using auto in that situation can sometimes have weird results. But generally, if your photo's exposed okay, auto will do a good job at giving you a nice starting point. So from here, I'm just going to I'll probably just tweak the temperature a little bit first to make it a bit warmer. So I don't want to go too much. That's overcooking it too much, but I think around about there looks good to me. And probably not gonna. No, I'm not gonna change the tint. And I'll probably just tweak the tone settings a little bit now. So let's have a look. I think I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit. I think it's just made it a little bit too much with the exposure, so just brought that down just a little bit. Contrast, I'll leave that, I think, for now at least. Highlights, let's have a look. No, I think that was okay. Now shadows, I think sometimes it just brings up the shadows a bit too much with auto settings, so I'm just going to come down a little bit. And whites, that's not too bad how it was, so I'm going to leave that on +9. And the blacks, let's have a look. No, I'm going to leave that as well, so I'll maybe just come down just a touch. Okay, so once I've done the tone settings, I'll usually go to my colour settings after that and change the hue, saturation and luminance. So I'll start with hue usually. I don't always change the hues, but sometimes it's just not quite the colours that you want, so quite often I will play around with the hues. So the greens, now I've said in previous videos that I don't usually like greens, so by that I mean that they're greens, almost going towards the bluer end of the scale. I usually prefer more yellowy greens like this. It kind of usually gives a more autumny look in a way. But I'm actually going to contradict myself on this occasion, and I am going to go more green. Simply because it is summer, and you know, I just don't think the yellowy colour looks right, and also because the bird is like orangey, browny, it works well against the more green background. So I'm going to go to about there with the green, and yellow I am going to just bring that up a bit as well, so a bit more greeny yellow rather than an orangey yellow. The orange, so I'm gonna, like I said, I like the bird to stand out a bit, so I'm making the bird more, I mean that's too much, that's red, but I'm just going to come down a little bit with the orange to about there, and then I'll tweak the blue. That's just for the sky in the background, so I like it around about there, I think. Okay, so once I've got my hues sorted out, I'll move on to saturation. Now the red, it's not really doing much when I change that, so maybe a little bit in the flowers at the bottom, but I'm going to leave that, it's not necessary. The orange, I am going to increase that because, like I said, I want to make the orange breast of the bird stand out. So I'm going to go up maybe to about 17, I think looks good. Yellow, I mean we could pump up the yellow, make it look really warm, but I think that might be too much, so I'm going to leave that for now. The green, I'm going to bring the green down a bit because I've changed the colour of the green. I don't want it to be too dominant, so I'm just going to bring it down just to further emphasise the orange of the bird, really. So a little bit less saturation on the green. The aqua we don't need to worry about. The blue, I'm going to bring that up because it just brings a little bit of that sky through in the background, and purple and magenta I'm going to leave. And luminance, I would normally play around with the luminance, but I've already done this image obviously, so I know that on this occasion I don't actually want to play around with the luminance, but it basically just increases the brightness, or well, yeah, the brightness level of individual colours, so you can make the greens brighter or darker, or the blues brighter or darker, etc. So I'm just going to leave those on this occasion. And next I'll start going to the presence settings. So I usually start with dehaze, and dehaze can add more saturation and contrast to an image, so you can go crazy either end of the scale, which I don't recommend, but I'll use it quite sparingly, and I'm just going to increase it a little bit just to give it a little bit more richness and boldness to the colours and saturation and contrast. And clarity and texture, I am going to use these, but not yet. I'm going to use these locally, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So just generally I'm going to leave those. So what I mean by editing locally is that you can use these tools up here and in this kind of top bar just underneath the histogram, and you've got the kind of gradient, and you've got a radial gradient, and you've got a brush, and I'm going to be using the radial gradient today. Radial filter, sorry, not gradient. So I'm just going to click on that, and that allows me to just draw out a circle on my image, and you can rotate that slightly if you want, you can make it bigger or smaller, you can move it around. I'm just going to put it over the bird, and if you hit O on your keyboard, it'll show you the area that's going to affect. So you'll see the red area here on my image is going to be affected by whatever settings I change now, and the area that's not red won't be affected. So what I actually want to do first of all is I want to invert that. So down here I'll click invert, and that swaps it around so that everything inside my circle is going to be affected. And what I want to do is just increase the clarity and texture on the bird, and that's why I didn't want to change anything on the overall picture. I didn't want the whole image to have more clarity and texture, I just want the bird to have a bit. And the other thing I'm going to do just before I change those is I'm going to set the range mask settings. So the reason I'm going to do that is because my circle is still affecting a little bit of the background areas, and I want it just on the bird. So if I click range mask, select luminance, and you can bring down the slider here, and you'll see it changes. So it just looks for areas of dark and light in the image and adjusts the mask to only affect those areas. So if I just bring it down to about there, and that should just change the settings on the bird only. So now I'm just going to bump up the texture just a little bit, not a lot, and bump up the clarity, and I think that's it for that one. So I'll close that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do more or less the same thing. I'm going to draw a circle around the bird. This time I do want it to affect everywhere outside the bird, so I'm going to make it just big enough so it's not affecting the bird itself. And what I'm going to do now is more or less the opposite. I'm going to bring the clarity down on this one, so quite a bit, and that's just to soften the background, so really making the bird stand out. We're going to have a soft background with less clarity and texture, and the bird's going to have a bit more clarity and texture. And bring the I'm going to leave the texture actually, just bring the clarity down, and maybe the dehaze just to soften it as well, but not a lot, just a little bit less dehaze. So that's it with my local edits. So I'm going to move on to some of the other settings now. I'll probably look at, so I quite often do this earlier on in the process actually, but I'm just working my way down through the settings, to be honest. So we'll look at sharpening now. I'm going to bring up the sharpening a bit to about 50, and I'm going to leave the other bits. And then if we zoom in on this, we'll see there's a bit of noise here, the little kind of speckly dotty background, and we can reduce that a little bit by using noise reduction. So we'll bring the luminance slider up. Now you can bring it up a lot, but it starts making the image look soft and you lose clarity then, so you don't want to do it too much. We're going to go to about 20, and that's looking a bit better. What we're also going to do is, with the sharpening, we're going to choose what areas will be sharpened and what won't. So we've got this slider at the bottom called masking, which will choose which areas are affected. And the way you can see what that's doing is by pressing Option or Alt if you're using a PC on your keyboard, and then with that Alt key or Option key held down, you can move the slider and you get a black and white kind of image, which will just show you the white areas are being sharpened and the black areas are not. So you just got to get into a nice area where the background, big flat areas of background, are not being sharpened and the kind of edges are being sharpened. So about there, I think. And if I turn those settings on and off, that's without. You see it's quite noisy. And then we turn it back on. You do lose a little bit of sharpness, but you know, it's always you know, you've got to weigh it up what you want, sharpness or noise really. If you want it really sharp, you're going to have noise. If you want it really smooth and not and with no noise, you're going to lose sharpness. So yeah, you've got to decide really, and I think that's a nice balance between the two. So we're getting there now. Now I'm going to bring this into Photoshop in a second, but just before I do that, I'm just going to make some final tweaks. I think I want this to look warmer still, so I'm going to bring up the temperature quite a bit. I think it's around about there, so you've got this really nice yellows coming through now in the background. It looks a lot warmer. And I'm going to bring saturation up just a tad. It was on -1, I'll bring it up to none, and just a little bit of vibrance. So not a lot, just very subtle little extra vibrance and saturation there. And yeah, I'm going to bring that into Photoshop now. So you can hit Command and E, or if you're on a PC, Control and E on your keyboard, and that will bring up Photoshop, and it will bring your image into Photoshop. So here we are, and like I said, what I want to do with this is bring some of these purple flowers up into the top left hand corner, because like I said, I really like them. I like how they stand out from the image. You know, you've got all the greens and oranges, and then you've got these like bright purple bits at the bottom. But the problem is, because you've only got them at the bottom, it just unbalances the image a little bit. So what I'm going to do is clone one into the top right, so that it balances the image out basically. And to do that, I'm just going to make a new layer. So down in the layers palette down here, you can click this little icon down here next to the bin. That just makes a new layer. And then I'm going to use the clone stamp tool, which is here, and just change the size of my brush. You can use the brackets on your keyboard, the square brackets. The left square bracket will make it smaller, the right square bracket will make it bigger. And then using Alt on my keyboard, I can select this area here as the area I want to clone. And then I can just paint that up here to copy it. Now obviously that doesn't look right at the moment, but what we can do is go to Edit, Free Transform, and then we can rotate that. If we hold Shift on the keyboard, it'll snap to even numbers, and we can go up to -90 degrees. And then we can just drag that to the corner, click the tick. So that's looking better. But I've got these little kind of branch areas here which don't look quite right. So I'm going to add a layer mask by going to Layer, Layer Mask, and Reveal All. And then using the brush tool and changing my colour to black, I can just paint some of these areas away, and that's basically wherever I paint black. So you'll see a little bit of blacks appearing down here on the mask. Wherever I paint that black, it'll just mask out part of that layer. Now when I did this originally, I took a lot more time, but I think just for this demonstration that's going to be enough for now. And also what I'm going to do is, because we've got the purple doesn't go right up to the corner here, you've got this kind of like more pinky area here, and I want to copy some of the purple up there. So I'll just use the clone stamp again, make my brush a bit smaller this time, select maybe that area. Whoops. I'm on my mask, so I need to click my actual layer rather than the mask. Just paint that in there. And again, that's definitely not perfect, but it'll be okay just for now. And I might do the same down here because we've got the same little bit of pink area there. Okay, so if we hit Command and S or Control and S on your keyboard, that'll save that. And that brings it back into Lightroom. And you'll see we've got the edits that we made in Photoshop. So the only thing left for me to do now is just add a little bit of a vignette. I do this quite often, particularly if there's a subject in the center of the image that I want to draw attention to. And if you just pull the slider down, the amount slider just darkens the corners a bit. Don't want to do it too much, but just a little bit, and that just draws the attention to the brighter area in the middle where the bird is, and it really just brightens that up and makes it look a bit nicer. So there you go. I hope you liked it. I hope it was useful. You know, if we look at the original image here and compare it to now, it's not a massive difference. It's just I've made some subtle edits to warm it up, changed some of the clarity and texture on the bird, and brought it down on the background and things. But it's all just to draw attention to the bird, and the cropping was an important part of it. It was just too much going on in the large landscape image, so bringing that down to the portrait format, I think really helps, especially like I said with the branches and how they're lined up with the rule of thirds. And yeah, just balancing the image by bringing that flower up into the top corner with Photoshop. So yeah, like I said, this is from my little trip out, which is in the video coming this Sunday. Once that's gone live, like I said, I'll link it. So I'll link it again up here if you want to watch that. As ever, thanks for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed and you like the content, please consider subscribing. And yeah, I hope you'll tune in on Sunday. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.